Hello, woman beings, and welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. We are so excited to be here with you today. We are going to be talking about Miss Kelley Warner and how she got married at the ripe age of 18. It's going to be amazing. We're going to dig in, ask all the great questions, all the burning questions we know you have. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome to the Woman Being Podcast community,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds
without expectation or judgment.
We will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
So, Kelley, you got married at 18.
I did.
Engaged at 17.
I did.
Tell us your story. Like, what happened? Like, how
did this happen?
Like, it's, yes.
Yeah, no, it's strange. Yeah, 3 weeks after I graduated high school, I got married at the end of June. So we had met when I was 16, and Ross got my number from one of my friends who was nosy, but who I'm thankful for. And he texted me, and we started texting, and we hadn't really interacted a whole ton before that, but he, for some reason, wanted to text me. We started texting about Bible things, and we became what we called Bible study buddies.
So cute.
Yeah. So we just started reading through different books of the Bible and talking about what our impressions of it were and what we thought, and texting conversations turned into phone calls, which turned into Zoom calls, and...
Well, Zoom didn't exist, but...
Skype. Yeah, it was Skype, you're right.
Yeah.
And we started reading, Christian books together, and before you knew it, we were friends, and then we were best friends, and then he was like, yeah, I really like you. And I was like, whoa, I am not interested in a relationship right now. But hit me up in a couple years kind of thing. And, but he kind of kept pursuing me and wore me down. And he started coming to visit. So he came to visit. And I, the first time he came, this was all long distance, by the way. He lived in Iowa, and I was from Minnesota. And so he drove up, and I was very smitten. I think we had been cultivating a relationship for about a year at that point or more, and no, actually it was less than a year. And I was like, I'm in love. He drove away. He came for the weekend, and he drove away that Monday morning. He dropped me off at school, and then he went at high school, and he went back to wherever he was. I think it was a spring break or something, and
because he was in college, right?
Yes, yeah. And I got into my college chemistry class that I was taking and sat down next to my friends, and I was like, I'm in love. And they were like, ah. So from then on, it was kind of I'm going to marry this guy, and I know it. And he actually reached out to my dad several times, twice, and asked if he could not date me but court me. My dad said no. He was very anti-dating. And so Ross was like, okay, well, I'm just going to continue doing what I've been doing then. We were basically courting already. We were talking all the time, and he was driving up to visit. He actually took me to my junior prom, and it was adorable, not going to lie. And that summer, we were all at this conference where we had met, and Ross was like, I think I'm going to ask your dad if I can marry you.
And you were just like...
I was like, good luck, bro.
And you were just kind of
okay. And he was he'd been fasting and praying, and he was into it. And so he sets time aside with my parents and asked them if he could marry me. And by some miracle and the grace of God, my dad said yes. And
after he had said no to you guys dating twice.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm 17 at this point, the summer before my senior year of high school. And I was like, I'm going to go to college at Iowa State. And he was like, well, if you're coming to college where I'm going to college, because he was also at Iowa State, he's like, we might as well get married. And I was like, okay. And so my parents had said yes. His parents were on board. We had the family like blessing on both sides, and it just felt right. And I felt the Lord's peace on it. I felt my parents' blessing on it, and we were like, I know this is the person I'm going to marry, and he knows. And I mean, really, it was like, we don't want to be at college without any accountability, and like, you know, we know we're going to get married anyways, and we don't want to accidentally have sex before we do, and let's do it.
So is that like a main motivator for you? Was like, well, we're going to be living in the same place, so like, we might as well be able to have sex?
It wasn't, yeah. I mean, like, pretty much. Like, yeah. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but yeah, like, at the root of it, it was like, we're going to be alone. Not alone, but like on our own for the first time. We already know we want to get married. Why not just get married? Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, financially, it was a good decision, and we could live together. And so, yeah, that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild.
I know. And the crazy part is that we knew each other for like, I don't know, 8-10 months before he was like, I like you. And then another like 3 or 4 months before it was like, we're betrothed. Like, my parents had given their blessing, and we knew we were getting married, and we kind of had a venue picked out. and then he proposed to me when I was 17. It was right before my 18th birthday, because he came on the weekend before my birthday happened, because he couldn't make it in the middle of the week. And he surprised me and proposed, and yeah, I went to High School Musical rehearsal that night. Not the High School Musical, but it was the musical that my high school was doing, and had a ring on my finger, and yeah, we got married that summer.
Wow.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And you're still together and going
yeah,
strong.
We've been married now for over 7 years, and I feel like the last couple years have been some of our best years of marriage.
Yeah.
So
before you even met Ross, did you ever think that you were going to be someone who got married young like that?
Not even a little bit. I was like, I mean, to be fair, I had the Christian mindset, so I was like, I'm definitely going to wait until I'm like in my 20s. You know, so it wasn't like I was like, I'm going to wait until forever. I was like, 25 seems like a good time to get married. So it's still young compared to like average standards, but to me that was reasonable for Christian. Like, I just didn't expect to find that person so soon. Yeah. And I had read Twilight, and Bella got married right after high school, and I thought that was weird, and you know, I was like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the high school bride. Yeah. Well, and plus, like, you're in high school, so going to school that Monday after I got engaged was like terrifying, because you're going to high school and you're engaged, and like, what are people going to say? How are they going to react? And so it wasn't exactly like the popular decision, or like a widely received acceptable decision. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, it was just like, I know this is weird, but I also know it's right. It's the right time for me. And so
like, I mean, going to high school, I get it. I had a sister that got married young. I still have a sister that got married young. But like, what kind of judgment and expectations were faced? I mean, I know that everyone was probably giving you advice and like trying to tell you what to do. And like, what was that like, getting married young with everyone throwing their opinions at you?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually overall surprised how supportive people were. Like, there were people I didn't know who were like, congratulations, let me see the ring. That was a big one. Like, because you're in high school and they're like, oh my gosh, she has an actual ring, and that's an actual diamond, you know? But I did have a couple naysayers. One of them I remember very distinctly was a friend's mom who was in the midst of getting divorced. did a whole lecture about how men are the worst and you don't want to get married so young, and he's gonna change after you get married, and like she definitely had a really rough divorce and was like, you don't want to do this, trust me. But it was kind of like one of those things where, yeah, she was an adult, but like she wasn't like an influence in my life or someone that I like held in high respect, and so it wasn't like soul crushing in any way.
Gotcha.
I assume that most of the negative reactions were done behind my back. Like, I know I had some uncles and aunts who did some conversations about me that like got back to me through someone or whatever. But there wasn't a lot of like, what are you doing? I did have one teacher who was like, who I didn't know super well, but I knew pretty well, who was kind of like, so getting married at 18, huh? Like, and she like kind of tried to like ask me questions about it, and she's like, I just don't think I was ready at that time, or it'd be so hard to be married in college, like sort of things, but she wasn't very direct about it. But yeah, like overall, I had a friend who's like, this is weird, but okay, I'm here for you. But like, it wasn't what I expected, that's for sure. And a lot of people actually said to me, they're like, this is weird, but I know you, and I know that you're responsible, and like you would think something like this through, and so I'm not as worried.
Yeah.
And so I had like a reputation for being like a responsible, well-rounded human who doesn't just like do things like that without like knowing it's the right time. So there's a lot of like, it would be totally crazy except it's you. So it did really feel like, and I'm not an advocate for like barely into adulthood marriage at all. I think it's more about the timing. Like, is it right for you? Because it was right for us. And I think like it's about finding the right person and the right timing, and this just felt right. Yeah. I think people get married at 35 and they think because they're older they've made the right decision or whatever, but you can rush into something when you're 30 just as much as you can when you're 18. So and definitely I think a lot of people thought that I was going to get
Pregnant.
Be pregnant. They thought it was like a shotgun wedding of sorts, but it wasn't. So we were virgin as the day is long.
Was that part of like your nervousness in going into school that first day, was thinking that people were going to make that kind of judgment of like, oh, well, she must be pregnant?
That kind of like any sort of judgment like that, like she's pregnant, she's crazy, she's, I don't know, essentially
swept away as this child bride,
etc.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that this keeps actually probably because in our world right now where we are, not in when this episode comes out, but we just watched The Bachelorette. And I keep thinking about that in the show The Bachelorette right now, we have this one bachelorette, Claire, who is much older. She's the oldest bachelorette they've ever had, 39, and she decided to leave 2 weeks in with the guy that she was like, I'm in love with this guy immediately, head over heels. And like, so there's that end, and she feels very like, well, because I am at the age that I'm at, I'm able to do that, essentially, is what it sounds like. It's a lot of like, I am a mature woman, I know what I want, and so I'm like, this is the decision I'm making. But you also see in The Bachelorette, they now have a new woman in, and she's talking to one of the guys, and he got divorced from his childhood sweetheart. Which he probably like, it was like, they grew up together, they knew each other, and like they didn't know anything but each other, and so they just got married, and it wound up being awful. And so I think that that's a lot of the stereotype you see in people getting married young versus old, and I think that's probably why a lot of people can be wary of a young marriage, because it's like, well, you don't even really know yourself, like, I mean, you had never lived outside of your parents' home, but there's so many things in knowing you where you had to be independent even, and like sort of provide for yourself even within your parents' household, you know, and the different things that like equipped you to be able to do this well, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think Ross, we were engaged when he was 20. Like, he was also far more responsible and like prepared for a wife than the average 20-year-old guy as well. Like, he was like, I'm financially ready to care for you. I have, you know, like, he had a financial plan. He had a job plan. He, you know, had saved up the money for the ring. And, like, it wasn't like I was entering into, like, a random guy who doesn't know what he wants or what he's doing.
Or, like, we don't have any money, but we're just going to run away and get married.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, he had thought through, like, no, it's more than just I love you. It's, like, I love you and I have a plan for, like, caring for you. And I think my parents saw that for sure in him, and that and like as you said, I was also responsible for myself, so I wasn't like gonna it's not like I was gonna like fall into crazy debt or whatever either, but we were both like, for our age, much more advanced in our financial and, you know, mental maturity. Although we still had a lot of growing up to do, and we did get to grow up together, and I think we do get to grow up together, I should say, because we're still doing that, but that's been actually one of the really special things about our marriage is, like, I knew Ross when we were in college, and he knew me when I was in high school, and, like, we have grown up together, and our ideologies have changed, and our ways of thinking have changed, and our, you know, communication skills have grown and all those things. And so it's really special to like look back and be like, we were so young and cute, and we have worked hard to cultivate what we have. And so that's actually really special. Also, for anyone wondering, because I know this is a big burning question, and this was a common concern that was expressed to me when I got married young, was like, it's going to be so hard to be married in college. And so, like, I went into it expecting that being married in college was going to be really hard for some reason. And, I don't know, like, studying or, like, I don't know why.
How will you focus?
Yeah, it's like, how are you going to do it? And, well, first of all, I will caveat with the fact that both of us had full rides. And so, financially, we were, like, we had a really good foundation. Well, he had a full ride. I had my tuition covered. And so, his full ride covered our housing. And so, like, we were covered in college, and, like, we didn't have to work. We weren't, like,
oh, that's awesome.
We weren't, like, trying to, like, do college and hold a part-time job at the same time and be married. So that I will caveat. But being married in college was great. Like, we would sleep in in the mornings. We had, like, blocks of time in the middle of the day just to spend together. Like, we got to watch movies and binge TV shows and, like, go out and play ultimate frisbee, and, like, we had a lot of things that we got to do just, like, being kids together. And that was, like, a really precious time for both of us.
Yeah, honestly, when I think back on, like, my college experience and just, like, the general college experience that people have, I think it would actually be more distracting to be, like, you know, dating, you know, like, because you're, like, you're meeting different guys, you're going to parties, you're going out with your friends, you're, like, looking for somebody. I feel like that takes so much energy and effort. And I think that also, especially, like, the sort of honeymoon phase of, like, starting to date someone is, like, mind consuming. So, like, you guys were already past that. Like, you guys were comfortable, and you're in your rhythm with one another.
Yes.
And so to me, that's less distracting. Like, that's steadying.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like, and Ross is steady. That's one of my favorite things about him, is he's always been, like, so grounding for me and so level-headed. And, like, I was, like, coming into college. It was wild, you guys. I graduated high school. 3 weeks later, I got married. We moved to Iowa. So I moved away from all of my family and friends and started a new life. And then we went to college. And then I started, like, learning how to do the college life and be married and live in a new state. So it was, like, it was a lot. I don't think I give myself enough credit for all that I went through in those first like 3 months of marriage.
That's wild.
And then like meeting all of Ross's college friends and trying to make my own friends, like there was a lot to like sift through there.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, we at least had each other to like lean on. And it was really more me leaning on him because he was already more comfortable in that space than I was. But like I had like a steady person to like help me through all of that transition. Whereas if I was just alone, I would have had to like make the friends and find the community without him. So, I mean, a lot of benefits actually to being married in college.
Yeah. So I know you touched on some of those like expectations that you had, you know, going into college, people telling you being married in college is going to be horrible and awful and all these things. But what were some of the expectations that you had in that first year of marriage as being so young, having certain like preconceptions about what marriage is like, about what it looks like to be a wife? What was that like for you?
Yeah. I definitely remember when I got married. I mean, I was 18. Like, I didn't know anybody who was married besides, like, old people.
Yeah.
Or in my mind, people who were old. And so I kind of, like, took on this sort of, like, quiet, supportive wife persona and was very shy and, like, subdued for, like, the first 6 months to a year of marriage. And it ended up being a thing that Ross like later commented on. He was like, yeah, you were like really quiet when we first got married. And to me, it was like I was thinking about all the women that I had seen modeled in my life who were younger and married, and was like, that's what a wife is supposed to look like. And this was not a conscious decision, I don't think. It was sort of just like, this is what a wife looks like. End of story. And so a lot of my like spice and fierceness sort of took a back seat for a little while. And then there's also this expectation that Ross was going to be this spiritual, you know, passionate leader who was going to one day feel the call of ministry and lead me into my destiny. And I had to realize that the passions in my heart for ministry and for, you know, anything related to that was stuff that the Lord was speaking to me. And that if my husband wasn't hearing that, like that was okay. Like I could still pursue those things without him, with his support, but like not without, like he didn't have to be the one leading the charge for me to be able to pursue my dreams. So yeah, those were a couple main things that were like, I definitely thought the husband was going to be the one to like, be like, let's adopt a child from wherever and go live in Zimbabwe and what, I don't know. Like I just thought like that was the thing that you do when you're a white Christian married couple. And so that's kind of what I expected, and that wasn't what happened. And so it was kind of like, wow, like trying to reconcile all of that and figure out like, okay, who am I and who is he and how are we working together? So, yeah. I mean, I think that's something I'm still learning, too, is learning to be my own person, but also be, like, one in the flesh with another person. But
yeah, it's very interesting because I feel like the things you're saying are very Christian, pervasive Christian concepts of what marriage looks like, right?
For sure.
And I think that it's kind of bizarre that we give marriage sort of a one-size-fits-all standard of what it should look like.
Yeah.
And that the man must fit into this very specific role and the woman must fit into this very specific role. And it doesn't take into account the diversity that we were made to have.
Totally.
You know?
And like the leaders in my life were mostly pastors who were men who had wives. Mm-hmm. So like to me, the female leaders in my life were those wives of those pastors. And so that like was, of all the examples I had of powerful women, that was what a powerful woman looked like. And so I just was waiting around for my husband to step into his role so I could like come under him.
Yeah.
And like mold it, or like fit into the mold that I felt
Yeah.
was there for me, but I also believed that he was the one who had to create that mold. And so I think learning how to step out on my own and create my own molds and be my own leader, which pre-marriage never were things that I worried about, you know, like, I mean, I think maybe I thought someday I'll have a husband and he'll provide this carpet for me to walk on or whatever, but like I just did things that I wanted. But after marriage, it was like, okay, now I don't necessarily get to do those things anymore. I have to wait for my husband to open those doors or something. I don't know. It's all very like subliminal, like not very. Now, like, you know, 5-7 years later, I'm like, okay, like I can look back and see that's what I was doing. But at the time, I don't think I was fully articulating that in my mind.
Yeah. So then how did you come out of that though? You know, like what was that process like to go from, to sort of break down those preconceptions that you had? Yeah,
I mean, it's been a growing process. I think the big one was when I decided to, after I graduated college, I decided to go into ministry full-time as a missionary. And what I told people was I had these feelings for ministry on my heart all this time, and I kept waiting for Ross to like get on board so that we could do that. And I felt the Lord speak to me very strongly and say, no, Kelley, I've asked you to do that. I've put that on your heart, so that's something you need to do. And the most amazing thing about Ross is he's just been like supportive all the way through all of this. And it never occurred to me that like that to him, that was his calling. You know, like he, over time and over arguments and over misunderstandings about what his role was supposed to be in those things, I eventually uncovered, like, he's like, I want to support you. Like, that is what I feel so strongly in my heart to do. And so I was kind of putting pressure on him that was kind of transferring what I felt was my calling onto him so that I could fully do my calling. And he actually had a calling the whole time. I just assumed that he wasn't listening or something, but yeah, he was doing what he felt his role was. And it took me a good 2-3 years through ministry to realize, like, oh my gosh, like Ross would do anything. Like he would support me through anything. And that is what he feels so strongly in his heart to do. And so, I mean, first of all, I'm so humbled by that and honored and privileged to have that kind of dynamic. But it took a lot of unlearning my religious expectations to fully appreciate what he's done for me since we've been married, and how much he champions me as a strong woman in the household. Mm-hmm. And I had to allow myself to be that strong woman, because I thought a strong woman's place was in the mold of what a man could create for her. And so it felt like he was holding me back for a long time. And like he wasn't connecting with the Lord in the right ways that I was expecting and whatever. And eventually I realized, like, oh, he's actually like, he's been so steady and faithful this whole time. And I've been like a wreck. And I've held him to a lot of different standards that were not fair. And so, yeah, that was huge.
Yeah, it actually makes you think of, if you guys have seen The Chosen, which is a TV series that is illustrating Jesus's life, essentially. And in the first season, it's sort of showing him start to gather his disciples. And I believe it's Peter who, in the show, I don't know if this is historically accurate or if this was something they took artistic license for, but in the show, Peter is married and essentially like leaves his wife to take care of the household while he goes and does ministry with Jesus. And to me, like, that's a mirror illustration of like, okay, one person in the relationship can go and do ministry and the other person doesn't have to go and do that as well. They can be that support. And so there you're seeing that with like the man going and doing ministry and the woman staying and supporting, which is a bit more typical, but like you guys were we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And it was a lot of, like, I had people asking me the same question, like, when is Ross going to join ministry? What's his deal? Like, does he love Jesus too? You know, like, and so it's not like, oh, I just picked up on some stuff that was never explicitly said. Like, that's definitely the narrative, is that the man is supposed to feel the call of God, and the woman is supposed to do whatever she can to support him in that mission.
Yeah.
And I waited around for that for a long time until I realized, like, oh, maybe I need to take action and do the things that the Lord has put on my heart instead of waiting around for someone else to make that happen for me. And but yeah, you know, we grew up, we learned. He was very patient with me. Ross has always been very patient with me. So, you know, I don't know. I think the more we've grown as a married couple, the more myself that I've become, which is amazing. And I'm so very lucky.
So you were married young, you went to college, then you went into ministry. There was obviously a lot of process and a lot of growing up that happened. And I totally understand what you mean by saying, like, we got to grow up together, and that feels really special. But did you feel like you missed anything? Like, do you feel like you missed out on anything because your path was very different from what's quote unquote typical?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, I missed out on the dorm life. I think it was really hard to make friends at first in college because we're freshmen, and I might have been the only married freshman that there was out there. And so, like, when it came to, like, connecting with people in my classes or in honors or, like, extracurriculars, I was always the girl who's like, hi, I'm Kelley, I'm married, you know, I have a great husband. And people were like you could kind of see them sort of disconnect because they're like, we're not on the same level. So I mean, it was never, like, negative. It was just sort of like, just
on different pages, you know,
right,
of life.
Right. And it actually, one of the best things I learned in ministry was, like, oh, I can be friends with single women, and this is great. And my husband doesn't have to be involved in my friendships. I definitely thought that, like, married couples have to be friends with married couples. And, like, that was how it worked. And we had a lot of hard times, like, trying to make that work. And sometimes we did make a lot of good married couple friends, but also it was, like, a lot of, okay, that one person came over to our house that one time and Ross didn't like them. And so what do we do now? How am I supposed to have friends? So yeah, there's that kind of dorm college life thing that I definitely saw other people participating in that wasn't really applicable to me. But looking back, I don't ever feel like, oh, I wish, or like, you know, I don't know. I feel like I had times in ministry school later on, like when I was traveling and Ross was at home, to, like, kind of experience some of that. If anything, Ross gave me more in life. You know, like, I feel like more opportunities, more experiences, like, because of him, because of being married, like, we got to travel. Because of him, I got to see the world, literally. Like, I really, looking back, I don't feel any regrets there, you know? Like, maybe I didn't get that, like, late night dorm. I didn't make friends in college as easy. I don't know. But, like, now it just seems like, who cares? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think that when you're in college, like, those experiences seem very sort of essential.
Yeah.
But looking back, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is pretty sort of surface level, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would be surprised to hear you say, like, that you missed out on anything that really would have been truly, like, enriching to your life.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, I mean, I think that if I look back at my college time, like, I loved it. I loved being in college, and I loved the community that I had and, like, the atmosphere of college. But you were still able to get a lot of that.
Well, yeah, and I think, like, having kids is a whole nother level of responsibility, but, like, when you're married, like, it's not like you're really tied down, or you can still do most of the things that you could do when you're not married. So it's like, maybe if I had had kids really young, I would have felt like I lost out on some of those young life experiences. But like, it's just a person that I love, that I live with, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, he makes me stay home, or he prevents me from spending time with my friends. And honestly, if you have a husband like that, or a relationship like that, like,
that's toxic.
Yeah, like
whether you're in college or not.
He shouldn't be holding you back from like fostering relationships with other people.
Maybe go see a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I actually keep thinking about the Christian organization I was part of in college. They would do like a video at the end of every year for the seniors that were outgoing, and one of the people that left the university the year before I came in, they got married while they were in college. Like, they met in college, got married in college. And in that video, they would give, like, their advice to the underclassmen. And the advice they gave was, get married in college. Because they loved it so much. And I remember hearing that and being like, that's a weird thing for them to say. Just because it, like, had never really even occurred to me, you know, the idea of getting married in college. Or obviously getting married before college.
Yeah.
And so I think that there can be so many benefits to it if you're doing it right. You know, if you're doing it in a way that's healthy and you know that the two people are ready for marriage, are prepared for that.
Yeah.
Because, the stereotype is often, oh, you're just like in love and whatever and reckless, and so you're just gonna get married, and you just wanna, and if you're Christian, it's like you just wanna have sex, so you're just gonna go and get married. And it's like, this is not a healthy reason to do any of this.
Well, and I know like a lot of people do wait until after they graduate college to get married. Like, they'll be in a relationship and they'll be like, okay, when college is done, then we'll get married, which financially oftentimes makes a lot of sense, because you're like, okay, we'll graduate, and then once we start working full-time jobs, then we can really settle down, we can buy a house, we can do all the married people things that are typical. But like, I feel like if you're financially stable and you're prepared to take care of another person, and like, it doesn't matter whether you're in college or, I mean, looking back, it feels kind of fruitless to be like, oh, like, what did I miss out on, or what did I, because everybody's going to miss out on something no matter what, like, life stage you're in at any moment. Like, I was married and I missed out on the single things. Single people weren't married and they missed out on the married things. And honestly, overall, I just have an overwhelming thankfulness for the journey that I've been on, and the marriage that I have, and the beautiful growing that we've done together, honestly. Like, there's a billion what ifs.
Yeah.
And so the most important thing is, like, I'm covered, I'm cared for, and I have a person in my life who happens to push me towards my dreams, and he's the best, so.
Yeah.
So then, moving away from the what ifs, what were some of the best things about being married young, and what were some of the most challenging things?
Yeah. Best things, I mean, I think I've already gone through a lot of these, but being in college, not having any responsibility aside from schoolwork, and just, like, living life. Growing up together, learning and growing together, I really cherish that. And even now, like, having seen us over the last 7 years, I look to the future and I'm like, I even see, like, Ross is starting to get, like, you know, gray hairs and a few crow's feet type things, and I'm like, this is so precious that I get to, like, be with him through life. And it's beautiful. I love that we get to age together. And he would be embarrassed that I was saying this, but, like, I love to see him grow older with me. And so that's really special. Best things, I don't know, like, not having to worry about finding a mate. Never had to worry about the dating world, never had to navigate that. I was allowed to drink alcohol at home because my husband was of age, and legally you're allowed to drink underage if you're under the supervision of an older...
A legal adult.
Yeah. Let's see.
That was the real reason that you guys got married.
Let's be real, though. At the time, I was drinking, like, cheap, like, pink wine.
Yeah.
Like Arbor Mist.
Yeah.
Sutter Home pink wine. Like, that was...
Hey.
To me, that was drinking.
I get it.
Which is great. No shame for anyone out there. It's delicious. But, I don't know. Honestly, like, Ross provided a security net and a covering in my life that I hadn't really felt before. And that is very precious to me, and I feel very, very privileged to have that. Worst things. I felt pretty isolated my first couple years. I remember in the first 2 months we got married, went on our honeymoon, and then we came back and we lived in his grandmother's house, and she was in a nursing home, so we were all alone kind of in this house in Winfield, Iowa. And we didn't have any internet access, and there was like nothing happening. If any of you have ever been to like rural Iowa, there is nothing happening. And so I was very lonely and bored. And like the only thing I really had to do was like read books. And like Ross was kind of helping his dad out on the farm. And I went sometimes and hated it, and so didn't really go very often. So I had like cooking and groceries and reading to do. But then we finally moved to college, and that was better. But it was still hard to make friends. So I felt like, and I was trying to figure out what that meant too. I eventually learned that you can be friends with either other women who are married and whose husbands are also introverted and want to spend time with you, or single women can also be your friends, and they're great. So, figuring those things out, finding my stride, learning how to be a human was hard, like how to communicate and figure out our communication styles and figure out how we argue and things like that. But, everybody has that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, like, at that age, there's so much of learning that on your own, of how you communicate, how you process your emotions, how you handle life outside of living in your parents' home. So then to do that with this other person as well, like, that's a whole other factor into that process.
Yeah, and he had a head start on me, so it's probably kind of frustrating for him that I was like, I was probably like such a mess and very emotional. And I remember I'm terrible at directions, and this was before we had like smartphones. And so I got lost a lot of times and like would call him crying on the phone, and he's like, I don't know how to help you. And I'm like, I don't know where I am. I'm lost in Iowa.
I used to do that to James.
And he'd be like, I can't help what street
you.
are you on? I don't know.
And you're just like, I don't know. It's so hard.
Like, it's dark outside already.
It's so scary. I'm going to get kidnapped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your locked car.
Driving
You never
around
know.
Somehow, you never know.
You never know.
So he was really patient with me through a lot of my growing up. And, And learning that, like, oh my gosh, my husband plays video games, and, like, what are people going to think? Video games are the worst, Like, that was my ideology growing up, and so eventually figured it out. We've got a pretty good system down now.
Yeah. So then, what would you say to, another young lady who's going to get married young, or who's thinking about getting married young? What is sort of your sage wisdom for them?
I would say, don't disqualify yourself from getting married young just because you're young. It's okay to get married young. You can do it. There's lots of pros, and there's some cons, like getting married at any age. And know yourself, know your maturity, and know the person that you're marrying. It's really more about, is this a good match for me, and are we ready, than it is about how old you are. So if you've got a guy who is empowering you, is ready to take care of you, is in it for the long haul, and you are also thinking those same things, then do it. If it's like, we just miss each other and can't get enough time with each other, like maybe spend some time away and make sure you're dealing with codependent tendencies. But again, that applies to any age. I really just would say age doesn't disqualify you or qualify you. If you're 40 years old, if you're 20 years old, if you're 18 or 17 getting engaged, like feel the moment more so than the timing.
Yeah, that's a good nug.
It's a good little nug.
So then I have to ask, what does young married woman being mean to you?
Of course. Young married woman being, you are your own powerful entity. You have joined a connection with another person, And you don't have to mold yourself to their shape. You don't have to change anything about who you are. Be your powerful, beautiful self, and allow them to be powerful and beautiful next to you. And if they love you, they'll support you. And, you know, you'll make compromises, and you'll submit to one another in love. But don't forget that, like, you can just pursue your calling, and you just have the benefit of having an amazing person next to you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Kelley, thank you so much for letting us pick your brain on getting married at 18.
Always.
So fun. And it was amazing to hear all the process you went through, all the lessons, and all the wisdom you've gained.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to wrap up, but don't forget, audience, that you can always follow us on Instagram at Woman Being Podcast, and also can check out our website at womanbeingcommunity.com. So we hope you continue to stay connected with us and join our conversations. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Catch you later.
Bye.